Okay, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, the preamble to the Constitution of the United States of America. All right, we're going to talk about the inherent betrayal of the state of the American people by having had abandoned the first principle of the preamble, which namely is life, abandoning any responsibility or guarantee towards the life of the American people that would come as an obvious consequence of their taking man out of a state of nature wherein man relies upon his own wiles, lives according to his own basic law and according to his own structure and perhaps tribal ancestral way, and instead bows towards a state that would prescribe law and program and what have you, in order to sort of collectively, in almost like in way of empire, unite the clans and peoples and tribes under one banner and under one law and under one rule, for the sake of establishing dominion and also the rewards that come with rulership over a territory that is taxable, right? Subject to the census and things of this kind, okay? So, let's get into it. I'm starting. I'm starting to work out actually after a really long time. So, I don't know. I'm kind of. I'm feeling good or whatever. But I kind of. I'll probably end up looking a little different over time as things go on. I haven't worked out in a long time. I'm been really caught up with my protest work on Facebook. Maybe one time I'll share my Facebook, but for now I probably won't. I've been doing. Basically work, vegan sort of activism, and work also kind of always advocating for the poor, because as we'll see with my conversation here, the main concern is with the poor, the people who are least rewarded and most disaffected under rule and influence of both state and private actors that reward those that they choose and favor, and ultimately in an anarchist state, abandoned to death, right? They reserve the right to kill patriots, to abandon and destroy patriots, which is something that could never be justified under law, right? So it brings us to I mean, you can't. I mean, if you lay claim to somebody, if you decide to be the guardian of somebody, or take them in under a program that involves, their total subservience to you and your will and your program at some fundamental level in a way that makes it impossible for them to provide for themselves or make rule and way for themselves, well, then you've taken responsibility for them. You're now responsible for their life and livelihood, because they can no longer be seen as the ones responsible for their own fate and destiny. They can't be expected to provide for themselves, because they're too busy catering to you, right? And your particular ambitions and your particular rules and what have you. They're no longer in a state of nature. If they were in a state of nature, they could go and build a little lean-to or build a little shack or build a little hut, and then they would have that. I mean, unless someone came in and conquered it and took it by force, that'd be theirs for life. There wouldn't be any taxes paid on it. There wouldn't be anything like that. It would just be their little hut, and then they'd be hunting and gathering, and that would be the end of it. And they would get whatever they accumulate. If they were alone, it would be 100% take for them. If they were in a tribe, well, then it would end up being sort of brought to the tribal circle, and the leadership would ultimately decide where it goes, to whom and to what measure. And there might be a hoard, and there might be some kind of a keep where the spillover or the excess is kept, and then everyone would get according to whatever the tribe decides are the natural and fair rules for allotting some kind of a share, right? But they don't do that. They take you out of a state of nature and they put you on the government program. So what are we talking about? Law. The satanic tribalism, as it has emerged to state power, which is in modern day known as fascism. It's the reason why nothing works and all ideologies are corrupt in this day and age. Why? Because it's based on the old satanic tribal structure. I've discussed this a bit in past videos, and in this one and in following videos, I'm going to touch on various aspects, okay, of what that is. It's kind of a hodgepodge of concepts. I don't really have an order for it. All of my videos are basically improvised. I know kind of basically like a couple of bullet points of what I'm talking about, but I'm just going to improvise and we'll see what we end up with. So the old tribal structure, like I said, instead of an equality-based tribe, and there were some like this that would, they did not have a difference between people. Like there was no big, no one wore the big headdress. One guy did not have a fancier hut than another guy. All the dwellings were basically the same or held in common. There was no hierarchy of reward. No one was favored one above the other. Women were free to possibly choose their own husbands. And did so without compulsion. Or if there was a standard of doing so, it was on a basis of equality. It wasn't designed to favor someone depending on how they were rewarded. And there was a flat sort of structure, right? It was meant to keep harmony and to avoid conflict and war and animosity and division. However, there was also a satanic kind of structure that emerged as a result of the evil wiles of people who would take rulership, who would dominate over their brothers, and who figured out that the way to do that was via the lies. So lying to and manipulating the people below you. At a certain point, you could justify some of it because, and how you did business, because you could argue, well, it motivated people this way, that way. It kept the tribe safe in this way or that way. It divided work in a way that best sort of catered to the strengths of this group or that group in the tribe, or that individual pulling his best characteristics to the fore and putting him where maybe a leadership, a panel of elders or a tribal leadership or just a chief would decide this is how it's going to go. Okay? Under them, you'd have the warrior class, and then later emerging the priestly class or the shamanic class that would be the shamans would be like a soft manipulation and rule. They're the ones who really were responsible for the lie. Started with stories, okay? The warriors were hunting and then warring and protection, right? Go into my other videos, I talk about how that works and how that leads to corruption and, ultimately evil, right? So, and under corrupt criminally organized groups, right? So I digress. So there's this other tribalism that creates a difference between people, and they're rewarded differently, and there's a visual difference that speaks to other people to let you know that there's a difference, so that there is a status system that emerges that differentiates one type of person from another type of person and speaks to the type of respect and rewards they get in that group, and therefore allowing an air of highness or mightiness above other people, allowing for this disunity to occur, and an ego, an arrogance to arise in the minds of those who are placed in a higher status position as opposed to a lower status position. And that difference, like we see in psychology studies pertaining to how prisoners interact with jailers, right, and their guards. We see that kind of difference immediately results in corruption and sadism and abuse in the people of the higher status position, in the guard position. They start to abuse prisoners, right? And that's ultimately what happens in these satanic orders and these satanic tribes, right? Same kind of thing. You're lower than me, therefore I abuse thee, because they'll get away with it. Now this brings us to the law and the Constitution, and why under fascism it's all bogus bullshit. It's not real. It's an inheritance of the shamanic tradition of lies, and the religious tradition of lies that we see in the Old Testament, like we see in the Jewish example, we see in other religious examples, Christianity, Catholicism. It's all a system of lies. These are not systems of the truth. And you could decipher the truth. It's there to be deciphered by the wise, But most people are not wise. They're not able to think through it because, if you were able to think through it, you'd be much more like a chief than you would be like an Indian, would you? Or a Native American low man totem pole type of guy, right? And they don't expect you to be able to decipher it, you know, and even their warriors oftentimes don't decipher it. But their chieftains can often decipher it because they're in a position of power and control, and they're trained to think in deceptive ways, right? So that they can rule over people with the lie, with deceit. So what are we talking about? The law, Constitution. Now you can see with the original tribe, they would have been big on Constitution. That's why they wouldn't do certain things that, you know, the satanic tribes would do. They wouldn't do it because they're trying to keep the law and they're trying to keep the peace and they're trying to make it so that people get along and live in harmony, right? In a way that, you know, speaks to the law. However, you know, they can't get away with the sort of stealing and hoarding and domination and abuse and pillaging and, you know, rape and what have you that goes along with the other groups that work on more, in a legitimate way. It might be more, instead of equality based, it'd be egalitarian, but that egalitarian arrangement doesn't last for long. It devolves into criminality, right? Abuses of power, taking beyond what anyone could ever justify, which is the state of capitalism right now, right? Abusing power in a way to compound power under criminal rubric, instead of, you know, just using the power that would be bestowed upon you as a guardian. Now maybe you use the fact that you seem to be above the law, you know, to get away with who knows what. Maybe you run numbers, or you, you know, you start running drugs, you know, while your boys hold the perimeter and keep an eye out, make sure that the rest of the cops don't cause problems. You know, you're keeping an eye out for the prostitutes. You're keeping a blind eye of the law to a human trafficking operation. Then you and your cop buddies go and, you know, take advantage by getting Hummers from the prostitutes for free because you've been keeping it locked down for them. Okay, so in that structure, that hierarchy is a two-tier system of law, where the law is used to oppress those who are on the outside of the inner circle, and it's used to keep them down and beat them down and what have you, as per the will of the chieftains. And even, you know, later the, you know, the militant band and even the priesthood, because they're given sort of like spillover immunity and powers in many ways. It's a go along to get along culture. So if you're on the inside and they know you're helping them run their whole criminal cabal, it's a spillover. So they'll let you get away with shit if they know you're one of them sometimes, right? You get all the benefit of the law and none of the hindrance, none of the stoppage, and none of the temperance that comes with law, none of the restrictions that are supposed to be there. They use the power of the law. They do not allow themselves to be hampered by the implication of the law, even though it's guaranteed, even under their own writs. Okay? So it works like that. What else? So the law, right. You see there's a two-tier system of law. So how do you have a state government with a constitution like we have in modern day, you know, and where it, you know, it continues to benefit from the evils of that satanic tribal order, right? And again, it was carried on into the epochs of rule throughout history. Everyone thinks we have different arrangements in government that occurred that are something other than tribal Satanism, but it's wrong. All we see is different incarnations of tribal Satanism. That's what the tribalism was, that then led to monarchy. Like, how do you think feudalism and monarchies arose? It arose out of tribes gaining power and wealth. Some of those tribal elders kept hoarding and accumulating to the point where they were vastly rich. Okay? And they built armies. That warring class underneath them, the warring class, okay, that kept growing to the point where they had vast armies that they continued to enrich and empower with the wealth that was accumulating. More weapons, more, you know, more armor, right? More training, more know-how. We talked about how fascism and tribal Satanism spread not only by war, people conquering, but through mercantilism and the trade of ideas and stories and notions about corrupt rule, lying, cheating, how you can continue to extract more from your people while giving less, how you can deceive them to follow this even though they shouldn't, in order to, consolidate power and to further increase your reach and grasp into what might be their labors and their holdings, so that you could extract it. So you could extract it from yourself, leaving them with less, right? And empowered not at all. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, right? How you put them at threat, how they use war to put people not only under conditions of something like slavery, but also under submission and subservience at rule, right? Under your rule, right? So, the monarchies that emerged at one point in feudalism was just tribal Satanism built up at the point of wealth and power that had come to define the epoch, right? Now, eventually they say, oh, well, what changed the capitalism? Oh, well, then it was the mercantile class. Well, the mercantile class were still a part of something like, in many instances, well, I mean, this was what seemed interesting about it. It seemed like there could have been some people from the lower classes that emerged and arose in something like a cottage industry to a point of becoming merchants themselves, whereas before it was mostly the wealthy, or people who were employed by the very wealthy, the chieftains, to go around taking their wares and go around shopping it around, see if they can get something from other tribes, other areas, right? Other tribes, other areas, so that they can get things for their tribe that otherwise they wouldn't have, that in exchange with other tribes. It seemed to be a peace offering, but oftentimes it wasn't a peace offering. Oftentimes, it could have been just a way in to learn something about that tribe. And, once you know something about them, then they're vulnerable to attack. You could actually invade them. If you knew where their horde was, you could ride in with a gang and you could go on a marauding campaign. Steal their horses, steal their fucking whatever, by way of what? Burn down their village. Right? But the law is what's required to avoid all this shit. But they don't apply it fairly, And I'm going to go on to it in a minute about how this relates to democracy, modern democracy, the state at law. The state only being ever possibly seen as valid, especially after a history of Western materialism and Western philosophy. How it could only ever be seen as valid if the law was applied sanely and fairly. What rational, reasonable man, philosopher would ever subject himself to a state that was based on obvious lies and magical thinking and cult bullshit? No fucking self-respecting philosopher, sane, freedom-loving man would ever allow that. I kind of digress from the point I was trying to make. I'll get back to that in a minute. Women. Another big thing we kind of touched on in my past videos. Another big part is competition for women, right? Men in control of the wealth, in control of power and status and everything else had ability to not only appeal to women to a greater extent than the common people in the tribe, who could have been much better, much greater in moral character, in decency, quality of character, quality of personhood. But it doesn't matter. They turned it to a materialist nightmare wherein, women were either seduced by material holdings and an appearance of power and dominant position, status, and, the appearances, the trappings therein, the jewelry, the pomp, the fanciful parties, the insider, little arrangements and gatherings and this and that. Seduced by that. And when they weren't seduced by that, they were just fucking taken. They were selected and taken, kidnapped sometimes. And there's a big history of that in feudalism. Peasants fucking wanting to go to war for shit like that because nobles would ride in, or their fucking armies would ride in and fucking steal their women. Burn their village down, pillage, rape and pillage. So we see how it goes. Let's get back to the law, because I just want to make this a quick video on an initial point before I move on. Now, you got law is the achievement, realization, and application, maintenance, enforcement, right? Honoring of a principle. moral principle at law. It's law because it's decided to be a protective principle designed to guard a particular life or aspect of life, a known freedom, a right, or whatever that's considered to be natural and inherent in life. Self-evident. To violate it is unthinkable. It's atrocious, right? It's unthinkable to imagine such an imposition, such a violent affront to someone's life, because the damage is clear, right? Law is an effort to avoid harm and damage, and when those damages are done, it's obvious, and that the obviating statement is encoded at law, and we all agree. I mean, it's generally, most laws put in place, we're not talking about statutes here, although those could apply also in this way, but criminal law and what have you are there, and they're pretty much, they aren't very controversial. I mean, if it wasn't written, you'd want it written because it's so obvious. It makes all the sense in the world. You couldn't imagine a life without that much understanding. Okay? So we see such a thing in Constitution when we say, look at the United States preamble, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, what's the first one? The first promise in that is life. So it's an understanding that as a state that drags someone out of nature, that you've been made something like a patriot, that you're now on the government plan that steps outside of any reasonable understanding of your freedom in a state of nature, and therefore, as a result of your having had been united to a common cause and set to the agency of the state to some degree or another. Like I said, at some level, in many ways, we were raised as communists. There's no such thing as rugged individualism when we're raised under conditions of the state as we know it. There's no such thing. It's a lie. Conservatives argue for it because they keep trying to infect your mind with the old ideas of tribal Satanism, but they bake it in the context of a modern state, which they're incompatible. They do not fucking go hand in hand when the state is run by law. The only way that they could achieve that is by lying to you and making you believe that the state need not operate according to the law. And again, those tribal Satanists were anarchists. See my other videos. It's all related to corruption, crime, evil rule, lying, right? And ultimately the will to kill. So terrorism, threat, the ability to do away with somebody who is inconvenient to the tribal leadership by murdering them, right? Or enslaving them or whatever, denying them their rights at law, whatever it might be. Okay? Does that make sense? So it's the same thing here that we see when we're looking at the violation of their promise to protect life. Now that is socialism. That's a promise of socialism. The United States is known to say, even Donald Trump said, we're never going to be a socialist country. We're never going to be a socialist country. Though their constitution guarantees it. It's the first guarantee that there will be socialism. Why? Because it's telling you it's going to protect and provide for your basic needs, your life. They act as though that is a Marxist concept, a communist concept. And we'll get to Marx later. Marx is not a straight shooter. He's another fucking rogue that takes what is a sane argument, any sane person could arrive at most of it, just like Jesus did that shit, and then he runs it off a cliff. He shits the bed big time, and he hopes that you don't notice at that point, because at that point he's got you, and he can bring you back to what? Tribal Satanism and anarchy. That's what he does when he says, communism can be summarized by one statement. After all that he said that you could agree with, summarized by one statement, the abolition of private property. Well, if that isn't the craziest, stupidest fucking thing you've ever heard of all time, if he would have said it right out the gate, first thing he said, you'd never believe it. And you'd be right never to believe it, because it's obviously a theft. It's a theft. It's a violation of your basic securities. All security that comes with basic possession and basic holding of the stuff of your fundamental basic well-being, right? Your life, providing for your life, shelter, clothing, food. Why does the state have to own that? The state shouldn't own that shit. Now, if you own 10 different properties, different story. Anything other than a residential property, yeah, maybe the state's got a say in that. Because it's got to make sure everyone's got at least a place to live, a primary residence. So it makes sense that the state would have their nose in that, quite possibly. But he doesn't say it's like abolition of private property. So now you don't own your house. Now the state's got you by the balls. And that's an old anarchist trick. Whereas, you know, they get you to build a house on the land that they say belongs to everyone, and then they vote you off the fucking land. Do it quick. And without, you know, you having recourse to stop them from stealing your fucking house. It's an old fucking anarchist commune trick. Working on, you know, Nellie's farm. Build your little shack in the back. You think it's going to be yours? I don't think so. Get the fuck out. It's my shack. It's my land. I'm the only one on the deed. What are you going to do about it? Enter China. Enter Russia for a period of time. It's no coincidence that happened. It was a satanic ploy, and it worked. They did not tell you how the government was supposed to run. You didn't know, and they did not walk you through it. Marx did not walk you through what law looks like when you're trying to socialize the government. And so it wasn't socialized. It was the same tyranny as ever. Okay, so they have to break you back to anarchy because for the law to work, a principle has to bear through to its intended purpose of protecting life. The principle must hold sound in order for it to protect the life that the principle is meant to represent. Does that make sense? And guard. If the principle is broken, then the guard is broken. It's like a defense. It's like a defense. The law is like a shield, a defense. You break the principle, you break the guard, then they can get through the defense. And what is it's the life. It's the life that takes the hit. That man gets stabbed. It's over. Right? You're injured now. Maybe you die. That's what the United States is about. It's about lying to you and guaranteeing a principle, but they immediately take it back. They do not give you the principle. All of their politics that come after violate the fucking principle. Every political party in the United States today is akin to something like an evil religion that's got one thing in mind, and that is to present something like a sane idea, a good idea, a lawful idea that has something to do legitimately with governing, and then they break the fucking logic somewhere. They break the idea somewhere, and it's a break away from the law and towards anarchy. The sort of thought that should never be allowed in formal government. It should never be allowed. Why? Because it amounts to an attack on people. It's not, you don't have to think far into it to see how it destroys lives. It puts people up on a pike and a pyre to burn in a Holocaust. That's what homelessness is today. I discussed it in another video. It's the open air prison camp of Western democracies, fascist state. They know it's going to happen. They know how it happens. They know how to prevent it. They don't do any of that shit because they're okay with those people dying as long as they get to keep accumulating wealth and power and terrorizing the people who are still working for them. They see people on the street. It's terrifying. They go along to get along. They're not arguing for rights. They're not arguing for fair treatment. They're not arguing for better wages. They're not unionizing. They're not pressuring employers to quit terrorizing them or pressuring them to give them a fair wage. So they break the principle. Without the realized sane principle at law, there is no protection to the life. So where the principle fails and dies, so too do the people who are protected by it. That's what the law is. It's a protection to promote life. We talked about Eden in the other video, the natural sense of faith, the natural sense of law, the natural sense of stewardship and well-being and good faith and good dealings, honorable dealings. It's part of us. They under dark leadership, telling the lie, making what isn't is. They commit to anarchy and the violence and the alienation and the killing entailed in order to take power and get what they get out of that arrangement. Okay? So almost everything that we see today is a reflection of that violation, that betrayal, that abandonment of the law in the name instead of tribal Satanism. trying to fucking, take over through these lies that, like I said, have been spread globally amongst traders and by war amongst chieftains and merchants and warriors. You'd go into their houses, you'd see the swastika would be right there. That's a good sign that they were a right-winger. It was a good sign that they were a fucking fascist, a Satanist, a Nazi. A lot of them were wealthy. What did it mean? It meant wealth. It meant luck. Well, there's no luck to it. They were a fucking organized criminal gang. Still are. Same to the meaning in Nazi Germany as in India or anywhere else. They were not different in my mind, according to my theory. So, anarchy. That's what we have today. We have a fascist state based on anarchy. What is how does that work? Well, they're all telling you a lie. We're going to talk about the difference between a real democracy and what we have today, a fascist tyranny, okay? And the main thing is that, look, there's no sane democracy in the world that would ever be married to a religion. That's obviously lying to you. All the religions of the world basically at one point start to lie to you. They take the things that are true about life, like I said, and then, because you can't deny it, you cannot seduce people with things that don't resonate with the truth that you know, physically, economically, socially, spiritually. You've got to include that to have people go, oh, what's he saying? Is it true? And then you break it and you turn it against itself so that, the power inherent in that, the achievements of that way of thinking are thwarted by your derailing it to a dark direction. That's what Jesus did. That's what almost every leader did in the Old Testament Bible too. The New Testament is a sequel to the old one. New sequel to the old one. So why would it take a totally different course in meaning? It doesn't. It's a banger of a sequel, and it's fucking horrible, and Jesus is a terrible, terrible man. No one talks about that. Why? Because we're still under the influence of the satanic tribal power. I'll talk about what I think of those stories later. The religions are a result of the tribal priesthood or the shamans lying to you, the soft front to keep you under the deception of the tribal Satanism, keeping you a follower and keeping you docile and stopping you from rebelling or arguing for your rights or stressing about the fact that they've perverted your entire people to evil, putting all your souls at risk of damnation from a righteous God of law that wanted us to live in peace, that wanted us to be good to our brothers, that wanted us to cease the fighting and cease the killing, live in harmony with nature, be the leaders of this planet to bring it to a heavenly kingdom that could only be had under law, that could only be had under conditions of supreme humanitarianism and supreme respect for life and love of goodness. You can't get there when they're hacking and slashing and killing and lying and deceiving and betraying their way to a horde for few while, oppressing and enslaving and violating and abusing and raping and killing and pillaging and murdering, everyone underneath. And you helping them do it. So we have the remnants of their historical success along the lines of dominating and oppressing people, and it's still there today. It's still there today. We have not won the fight. I'll talk later about how the U.S. lost both of the wars of independence and the Civil War. They lost those wars. People act like the Union won it. They did not. They lost. What did they lose? They lost to slavery both times. Mental and effective slavery at state. They did not establish the principles required to effectively escape slavery. They said the Civil War was a war against slavery. Well, why didn't they defeat slavery then? They didn't defeat it. Yeah, some of the African American slaves were released, but they did not defeat it because they didn't defeat the underlying problem of it, which is that they're continually denied, real representation at law and the guarantees, the securities that are required to all patriots. They're still not guaranteed that. That's why there was a Great Depression. That's why, people are still dying on the streets today because they still haven't gotten out from under the satanic leadership that causes those things to happen reliably and predictably in favor of the empowerment and pillaging system that's designed to, above all, benefit the ruling class. So, democracy. Well, what's that supposed to look like? Well, you don't marry it to a fucking crazy religion that is designed to lie to you, fill you with magical thinking that just perverts your thinking to break away from the principle and away from the law, and in the magical thinking, defect to Satanism again. In any manner of shit, which means they're going to have you kill and you're going to accept it. They're going to involve sacrifices of animals and human beings, and you're going to accept it. People going through the McDonald's drive-thru, people looking at the people on the side of the road going, oh, well, he's there because he must be mentally ill. Oh, see, that's what happens when you're not good to your man. Oh, see, all this shit. You're still doing it. You're still doing it. So away from the principle and ultimately to an offense to life, even unto the death of it, and all other manner of irrational, illogical, immoral, unethical, unlawful positions that ultimately amount to Holocaust. And that's the thing. Every time it'll amount to a Holocaust. People getting thrown on the pyre. People are dying as a result. You're supposed to guard your brother. You're supposed to look after him. The strong are meant to look after the weak. Are you your brother's keeper? Yes, at law you are, and so is the state meant to be. That's why its preamble started with life. You're guaranteed life. Are you guaranteed life in a state that kills you when they don't select you? You have limited amounts of jobs in the economy. Full employment is impossible. There aren't enough jobs, but they raise you up to serve. No, they don't let you do your own thing. Kamala Harris was going to throw fucking parents in jail for their kids playing hooky. There's not enough jobs to give all those kids jobs, but they're going to abuse you like that if you don't go to school. You get out, there are not enough jobs, musical chairs, someone's got to sit out. They're saying it's okay to let them die on the street. We'll never be a socialist country. You can't not square that at law. That's invalid rule. The state is not living up to its responsibility at law to take care of its pets. So, you cannot marry the state to a system of religiosity. That's obviously creating illogic that amounts to violations of the law. Most religions, in that they accept blood sacrifice, would be unlawful. They shouldn't even be allowed on the land. They shouldn't be allowed on the land. It's unlawful. It's a terrorist fucking religion. But they historically have been married to the state for the very reason that it allows the tribal rulership to do what I just said. Think of what happened through the Middle Ages. What happened throughout feudalism. Church right next to the state. You could not separate them. They were like bed partners. You couldn't get the Pope's dick out of the king's ass, vice versa. They were communing in a incestuous fucking relationship of anarchist evil rule. Fascism in the modern day is the worst from the point of view of that incest. Between that, the lying sort of propagandist wing, right? Which it was basically the religion, the chieftains, and the military, and the merchants. They consolidated that power so completely, they just crushed with an iron fist everyone beneath them, crushed them. Violations unthinkable, outlaw. You could never do that, outlaw. They were fucking savage in the extreme, as ever they could be. Why do you think Hitler was always calling back to the savage nature of their tribal roots? That's what it was. He had a tighter version of that tribe. He wanted to kick out all the global interests. Like I said, it was a global phenomenon, fascism and satanic tribalism, or tribal Satanism. But he was like, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here. It's just for the Aryan people in Germany. And we'll take your land and your land and your land and your land, and it's going to be German land. Fuck you, you're not Nazi enough. Get white. Whiter than white. So, it breaks away from the principle. What do we see today? You're saying, well, there's separation of church and the state. Yeah, well, in terms of the effective meaning of any of those religions, but not in terms of the structure. Look how the state operates. It operates exactly like a church. The state is a church. Let's compare it to democracy. Democracy would be a place where you have to stand in amongst the pillars, amongst other philosophers who are being held strictly and starkly to account to the other men in the room. Your voice is heard. It must be heard. It must be contended with. More than that, there's no such thing as a fucking secret ballot. You stand by your principles and what you believe, and you must account for them. You're being held account to them. Men know what you think, they know what you say, they're going to hold you to it, and it's like a fight. It's like a fight. You don't get to hide. You don't get to conceal your true identity or your true motives because you're going to be held accountable by them. You're not allowed to say this outside one side of your mouth and then go vote over here a different way. Lying to your brothers, that way the rest of the time they have to hear you fucking talk in front of them. They can presume that you're just entirely full of shit. Why waste the room? Why waste the time of the men in the room? That's not how philosophy is done. Or democracy. What do? They operate like a church. And now that's representative. That's you speaking up. You're representing the stuff of life. Represents the life. Fascism is the opposite. It talks down. You don't have a right to speak. They lie. They don't even let you know how they vote. There's no transparency. Or, what's worse is that they blame you for the decisions they make by talking about a representative structure wherein you vote someone in who doesn't even know you, could never account for you, uses the fact that you vote for them as validation, justification for the crazy shit they decided to do. Like you are the one responsible for the crazy things they decided to do. Like you gave them your support or something. How could that ever be possible? It isn't. It's a lie. It's a lie. It works like a church. Think about it. Not like a democracy. Top down. Someone speaks to you, at you, like a priest. They speak at you. You go in, you file in, you sit down. Are you ever able to speak? No, not really. No, you're not. You sit down and you shut up and you listen to them. Do they ever take into account, really, at the point of view of effective decision making, what you're saying is true about reality? No, they tell you what's true about reality. They tell you what's true. Oops. Okay, sorry, I had a camera problem. They tell you. You go there, it's like they sit and they pass the tray around. You put your little vote in there. Your little vote, your money. That's all you get. That's all you get to say. That's your contribution. You put your money, taxes or whatever, you put your little vote card. Oop, and do they know who you are who put that vote? Fuck no, they don't. They don't know. Doesn't matter. Just put it there. We'll handle it. We're going to collect the plate after. Trust us. It's fine. We'll spend the money the way we're supposed to. Trust us. We're going to make the decision the way you say. Trust us. It's like the rishis. Look how lavish and their temples were and everything else in India. It's such an atrocious perversion. Don't tell me the poor were getting fed when they were spending all that money on the priest class and their lavish temples. Never going to happen. Same thing with modern democracy. It goes to the rich. See what I'm saying? The modern state works like the church. It does not work like a democracy or a state. And they lie to you about the philosophy. Now, like I said, the content is not a religious content, but it is. They created the parties in the same way with the same broken way of thinking as the religions were sabotaged. They took note of that and they did the same thing. Again, how? By getting you to ultimately accept policies and politics that effectively result in Holocaust. Holocaust. Sacrifice of human lives, and they avoid the principles and the requirements at law and government and policy that would be designed to protect those lives. They should not be able to do one single thing in government that they would like to do until they handle the sort of things that they need to do in a priority, stepwise manner, starting from protect the lives of those who don't have anything, that need a shelter over their head. Put some food and some clothes on their back, people who don't have food and clothes on their back. Then we'll talk about another park. Then we'll talk about another library. Then we'll talk about whatever it is. a water park for the rich. But they keep doing all those other things with the claim that they're, somehow doing everyone some good, but they never, ever, ever achieved the law. They never, ever, ever landed on principle to the point of protecting the lives of your fellow countrymen and patriots. They've made you all complicit of fucking murder, of Holocaust and murder of all those people. And those homeless statistics and statistics of people who died as a result of contingencies related to homelessness or similar type of torture are Holocaust statistics. They're Holocaust statistics. And they make you look responsible because they're making you look like go along to get along gang, okay? This tribe of crazy bastards having a good old time listening to various popular bands at the rallies and at the fucking all this, the debates and all this shit, trying to champion in leaders that don't give a shit about the Holocaust, that are promising you more tax cuts to the rich. Or whatever else they're telling you. Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And oh, don't worry, we're never going to be a socialist country. They might as well have said, don't worry, we're never ever going to save a life that needs saving. We're going to cut all their throat and have fun doing it. Okay, I'm getting carried away with what I was going to say here. So it's the state that functions like a church. Go ahead. Try to step in as a real democracy, as a real Democrat, as a real member of the country, as a right to speak and have his voice and vote heard. Go ahead. Step into the House and see how long you get in there and say a fucking word before they drag you out. They'll shut you up. They'll send a guy to beat you down or drag you out. Or they will all pick up and leave the room. That's how much they fucking care about democracy. They will never confront me or anyone like me, a real Democrat, a real man of the law, a real man of the people. They will never let you do so to the point of the law because the law is not allowed. They're an anarchist, fascist state. They band together in their criminal cabal and then they implement systems of order at the level of anarchy, not the law. And then they use it to violate and beat down the people, denying the law and the lives of the people so that they can extract as much as they can out of them, be as violent as they can be to oppress and extort them and enslave them. And then they continue the lie ongoing, and it just keeps going. Now we're in, a state of, capitalism and fascism are still it's just tribal Satanism together. The capitalism is the economic wing. The fascism part is the ruling wing, the governance part. They go hand in hand. They're the same thing. The power is meant for the pillage. The pillage empowers the power. It's the chieftains with the warriors and the priest class doing it. They're chieftains in charge of the horde, all the rich people. It's like them in government. You can't tell the difference. Who's got the ear of government? The interest groups. The rich people giving millions of dollars to their campaign. That's the real government. They're the chieftains. So it's the same as it ever was. I think I'm going to probably stop that there as I'm going up on an hour. I have some things I've got to do. So, yeah, the law being a requirement, and the modern fascist state never ever achieved it. They promised it, but they lied about it. They never ever delivered it. And in fact, they politically endlessly talk about the fact that they will and celebrate it, that they'll never ever provide it. They will run that state, especially in the U.S., off a cliff because it's not designed to float forever. It's just designed to be a payout, a casino, one-armed bandit, They don't call it that for no reason. That's the fascist state. It's a one-armed bandit. And that's what you're seeing. Every political party, every religion. As you see people in the media, the ones that are left standing are all right-wingers. They all say something that will sound good, that will appeal to your sense of law and your sense of justice and your requirement for real democracy. Fairness, guardianship of life of your brothers. You know, they appeal to your compassion. But then they all trip that wire sooner or later. They all are going to, you know, ultimately going to cross the circuit and blip, oh, you're over on the right wing all of a sudden. Because they want to do that in all rhetoric and all representation of rhetoric. They want to do that in all progressive, you know, forward movement of history. They want to wrap it back around to the old tribal Satanism. Because that is where everything corrupts and they can do the same old as they always did in a criminal order. It's no coincidence that inevitably they all defect to the right wing. They could have a bunch of people representing various aspects of the truth and goodness as long as each one of them represents some aspect of defecting to the right wing. And they'll keep them in place just for that. Because they will gain the trust of everybody as far as the good stuff goes, and they will have positions in place that they're hard on, that they never ever move from, that are fundamentally right wing in a way that if people believe it, the whole fucking thing goes bust. Everyone's commitment to the sane movement, union by principle to protect life, fails. And it gives them the ability to go in and lie sufficiently to allow a bunch of people to die and to steal from them as a result of having had allowed them to die. Break the union, their will to resistance and rebellion and revolution, when they should be guarding their brother's life for the sake of even their own life. Because as their power and wealth accumulates, they get more greedy. Everyone's at risk. Everyone. The middle class is dwindling. They're all at risk of becoming homeless. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. So, I mean, they're always trying to seduce the working class. It's like I say this. I got to wrap this up soon. Every movement is a working class movement. Nothing moves without the working power of the working class. Do you think fascism happens without the working class? Hell no, it doesn't. They need them to be in their armies. They need them to provide the working capacity, the industrial power, the social influence, the on the ground, intimidation, on the street, in the household, in organization, everywhere, on the job. A freaking chieftain or someone else, a superior in any institution gives an order, it's the working class that makes it happen. Nothing gets done just like this. Someone's got to do this. So again, it's the lie of Marxism too. It does the wrong thing of creating the working class hero. The romanticizes them. He fluffs them and fluffs them and flatters them all the time. Because he knows he needs them. But it's wrong to lie about how fucking evil they are. How susceptible they are to lies and temptation. He doesn't out that because he's preying upon it. And like I said, he defects back in his way. The other shoe dropping, the other foot dropping or whatever was, there is no such thing as private property. That is the last thing you should conclude after everything he said. The last thing, you need security. You're supposed to be given security. They keep stealing it from you. They're supposed to get it, not lose it. So, nothing goes anywhere without the working class. Every movement is a working class movement. So, and we are known to see them defect to Satanism and fascism. Why? Because they're temptable. The government's always seducing them, giving them a dog-eat treat. Forget your brother. Don't vote New Democrat or anything like that. Forget the neolibs. I'm not talking about neolibs like Trudeau or, Biden or anything like that. They're just Nazis. They're Nazis. They're right-wingers, along with the conservatives who are always Nazis. Donald Trump is a fucking Nazi. Poilievre is a Nazi. Okay? Poilievre, fuck. Little rabbit nuts bunny fucker Poilievre, okay? They all are. The political parties, like I was saying before, are like a religion of broken logic. They don't do anything right. They don't profess to do anything right. They have no plans to do anything right, and they won't. There's a way to govern, and they want nothing to do with it. In fact, most of their policies are about expressly not governing. Not in any way that helps you, but rather extorting a rent or a payment for complicity with crime. That's Trudeau's thing. Oh, well, it's wrong to pollute, it's wrong to this and that. Well, don't regulate and tell industry you can't produce this sort of thing, you can't produce that sort of thing because it's wasteful, it's needless. No 7-foot tall plastic skeletons for Halloween. No fucking 15-foot tall, Santa Clauses and all this shit that are just filling up landfills. They last a couple of years. It's trash the day it was made and ended up on the store shelves. It's going to be trash forever. All the carbon that goes into that. No. Don't tell them, don't produce trash and, don't do that. Let them do it, but then take a fucking cut out of the people who don't even necessarily want to have anything to do with it. They got to pay a carbon tax on food because they're letting fucking industrialists run away with that sort of shit. They won't govern, and yet they're taxing you for their fucking treason and treachery. On your food, and they're starving people to death as a result. It's payment, which is bribery. It's bribery. But the state imposed the payment as a bribe so that they don't have to government, and therefore nobody, arm's reach distance from the industry who would have to pay them directly out of their hand, behind the back. So it doesn't count. It's this patently against the criminal code, what's happening, actually. So their mode of government is allowing for terrible, destruction to occur, violations to occur, damage to occur, acting as though it's government to not govern, and it isn't. Look, if you don't want to be a government or in government, why are you running to be the government? No government is not government. There needs to be government. But like I said, they break it so that there can be no government, and there could be no law, and there could be no protection at law. The fundamental kind that we need to stay alive. Now, I'm not saying we should live in a eco-paradise yet. Maybe we're not there yet. But there's a lot of things that we could stop doing that make no sense to be done, and that would at least get rid of, you talk about Polyev, axe the fucking tax. How about you stop the fucking obviously wasteful and harmful and needless production of trash, and then there's just less of a burden on the carbon system altogether, and there doesn't need to be a fucking tax. No matter how you